Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Frederica Whitfield. We begin this hour with breaking news. A major earthquake has hit Haiti today, and officials warn the casualties will likely be high and the disaster is widespread. Haitian officials say there are fatalities from this 7.2 magnitude quake already, but at this point, we don't know how many. And you can see some of the damage in these images that we're just receiving. Collapsed buildings, huge piles of rubble. The island nation was already in a state of chaos following the assassination of its president last month. And now this, an earthquake of a similar magnitude, which devastated the country in 2010, killing hundreds of thousands of people then. Patrick Ottman joining us now from Havana, Cuba. So, Patrick, what more are you hearing about the impact, what happened, and the calamity?
Well, we're starting to hear from survivors of this earthquake. You're talking about buildings crashing down around them, people having to run for their lives, and of course, the initial reports of fatalities. It'll probably take days or longer to know exactly how many people have lost their lives, but there are reports of bodies in rubble. There are also pictures of people near the epicenter receiving aid. So there appears to be some sort of organization, people being pulled from the rubble, people being treated, and there are pictures of buildings that are still standing. So that it does appear to be somewhat positive as well. The fact that this quake did not happen in the capital city of Port-au-Prince, where the 2010 quake took place and cost hundreds of thousands of lives, is also positive. But certainly for the people who are in this poor southwestern community, these towns that were struck by this earthquake, a terrifying scene, and people obviously don't have all the help they need just yet. They are still facing tsunami threat, aftershocks, and it could be a long, long time before help is able to reach them. This is a country that's been hard hit by natural disaster, by the assassination of their president in July, and now they are facing a tropical storm approaching in the next several days. So certainly continuing tragedy for the Haitian people, and they clearly need help right now because people are still being pulled from the rubble, and it may be some time, Fred, before we know exactly how many people have died here, but just a terrifying scene.
It sounds terrifying. And what do we know about its proximity to Port-au-Prince? I mean, the comparisons of this smaller town, but still clearly very populated.
Absolutely. Tens of thousands of people live in this area. It's a very poor area. I am told this is a peninsula. It's the southwest of Port-au-Prince. So that really is the only good news, if there's any good news here, is that the main population center was not hit as heavily impacted as it was in the 2010 quake. But of course, for the people who live in these small coastal communities, of course, you have a tsunami threat now. You have they're going to continue to have aftershocks. You know, this is a quake that was felt in Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, even in eastern Cuba. So it was felt throughout the Caribbean. A very, very powerful quake. The epicenter, though, in this small coastal communities in Haiti, and it's just devastated cathedrals, homes. You know, a lot of these places just don't have the kind of building materials or the buildings that are built strong enough to withstand anything like this. And those buildings we are hearing and seeing came collapsing down on people, obviously costing many people their lives. We just don't know how many yet. It'll probably take days before there's any kind of estimate. And for the injured now, you know, it's a race against time to get them the help they need. Certainly in the midst of a pandemic, it just makes complicated situation even only more so for these people who need help and need help now.
Yeah, Patrick Ottman, thank you so much from Havana. And who can forget 2010, the devastation, and still people have not recovered from that, and now this is to occur not far from Port-au-Prince. Thank you so much. All right, I want to bring in now Allison Chinchar in the Weather Center. And Allison, I mean, this is multifold, isn't it? Because while you're also watching these named storms, Fred and Grace, this is a different natural disaster that you've been watching. Tell me about the evolution of this 7.2 magnitude quake and what we know about it.
And unfortunately for Haiti, they could end up getting hit with both. And so that's going to be a concern going forward. Yes, the 7.2 quake, depth of just about 10 kilometers or 6 miles. It was a little bit farther west of where the big one that hit in 2010 was. Again, here's a map to show some perspective. Here is Port-au-Prince. This was where the quake in 2010 occurred. This is the one that happened this morning, a little bit farther west, but a little bit stronger. So again, one good thing is that it was farther away from the biggest populated area, but again, slightly stronger. It was also very shallow too, only about 6 miles deep. Really, technically, anything about 44 miles or less is considered shallow, even though I know 44 miles doesn't really sound shallow. In terms of geologic scale, it is. One thing to note is the population. Over 500,000 people felt what's considered very strong shaking, 5 million people feeling moderate shaking, not just in Haiti, but some of the surrounding countries as well. You do have what's considered an orange pager for economic losses. Again, it's very obvious to see that when you see some of the buildings and the damage that has already taken place across this area of Haiti. One thing to note, these buildings have now become structurally compromised because of the main quake. Any further aftershocks will continue to do additional damage. So even if you don't have a building that's maybe fallen down now, it could with some of the subsequent aftershocks. We've already had at least one 5.2 or larger. You average about 10 that size with an initial quake at about a 7.2. So you've had a 5.2 and several 4s in the mix of this particular quake. Liquefaction still going to be a big concern, and for those at home maybe wondering, I don't really know what that means. Basically, when the earthquake happens, it destabilizes that soil underneath and it mixes in with the groundwater, and basically that ground just becomes liquefied. One thing to note on top of it, Fred, is the impacts potentially from Tropical Storm Grace, because Haiti, at least as of right now, is still in the cone to have impacts from this on Monday. So that could be another factor, again, talking about rain hindering maybe perhaps some of the recovery efforts.
Oh, still so much more ahead potentially. All right, Allison Chinchar, thank you so much for that.